I would like to invite all three of you to come here, and we are now going to have, it'll be an open discussion. I have some questions. We invite questions from all of you, and we also just invite if you have reflections or experiences you want to share as well. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask to get us started? And if not, I will. Well, then I have many questions, and these come up from all of your presentations, but they came up in different ways. And as we get started, one question I would like to perhaps, and the ending is on the question of, it's like time, funding, institutional support, but about maintaining these commitments and how, like, in a sense, what institutionally might make it easier. But also one of the experiences that I've had is that if I am working in collaboration with a community group, as Rebecca was saying, is that that's an ongoing relationship. These are colleagues that I have, even if a particular project has ended, and then they do reach out at different times, and we continue to have that. I personally, I value it, but I also do find that I'll be working on other things, and suddenly there's, a need for engaging in something, and that is one dimension of timing, is those commitments. That, the timing of projects that may not be aligned with the university timeframe, and thinking of that, and that might be tenure promotion, it might be annual reviews, every department has and how you think about or navigate that, or any other dimension of project timing. Certainly working with students, every class has a little bit of a different tone to it. And so whether they're working, whether things are going faster or slower, sometimes it has an internal dynamic, and yet the semester comes and it goes in this short time. And so any additional thoughts on timing and how we navigate that well?
I think for me, it's just being considerate of the community that one is working with. For example, like with my poster board project, the students fulfilled the assignment, the semester was over, but how does one then continue to provide something that is of benefit to the community when they gave so much to the class, to the students? And so the poster boards were great in that sense, because we gave the poster boards over to the Sequia Association. We provided them with the electronic PDFs. And so even to the present day, they continue to be able to use the poster boards, as I was saying in my presentation, in collaborations with other Sequia associations where they're seeking funding from the legislature. So even though for us, the project terminated at the end of the semester, for the community, they still continue to be able to utilize those materials. And then, as the email from the student indicated too as well, he now is in contact with Don Bustos, who was the coordinator of the field work, and they're still continuing to correspond and to communicate, and it looks like in some ways they're also collaborating together. So I think keeping in mind that when we go into a community, not only is it a resource for us, but how can we also then continue to be able to be a resource for them after? And with timing, they're probably going to reach out at a time when you're already busy and moving on with other things. So
yeah, I think some further thoughts on timing. I feel like the pressure of working with like with National Science Foundation and maybe like the tenure and promotion process where we're expected to get out publications like at least once a year, but like the community they might, the community that doesn't care if we get out publications. And being able to, develop a responsible relationship, it requires you to be patient and to not rush any processes. And I think, especially the last few years, like during the pandemic and then the different closures that the Navajo communities had, and where those communities, they prefer in-person relationship building, but we really, to be safe, we had to do everything virtual. So in the end, had to, figure out how to adapt to not being able to build those relationships in person, and still find a way to honor commitments to your funders and to the institution as far as meeting grant and or tenure and promotion processes. I think, yeah, that was that's been particularly difficult for me to navigate. And now that, I'm able to start rebuilding those relationships in person, it's I'm able to get out to the communities, but I won't have everything I need yet to finish those publications. And so, but it's been, that's something I'm concerned about, but I feel supported with the research teams that I'm involved in and with the department that I'm in, that they understand, the situations that I'm in. But I think it's just feeling a little uneasy about, how am I, how does this look to NSF, or how would this look to outside reviewers who don't understand that part of being able to build genuine and respectful relationships, in the amount of time that it takes.
I just always think it's helpful to have, how things are working and operating. If there's someone in the team who can help just keep track of certain things. As a faculty member, you always are kind of keeping track of your own clock if you're going up for tenure and promotion. And so thinking about how things stem off of that will keep you moving forward with the types of things that are prioritized by the institution, but also knowing that there's all of these other, there's deadlines from external, like the funders, but then there's the real timeline that's happening in real time with communities. That is very different. But I think just monitoring it can, at least for me, help me manage some of my own thinking, or maybe even at times anxiety around the time that's going into one project. Maybe I have to think about maximizing if other slices of time I have to get kind of things done differently in smaller parcels, because I'm doing so much time commitment in the community site, right? It just, puzzling your week together is different, I think.
Michael?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that, especially where Rhonda was speaking about that it sounds like from the way you described it, Lonnie, and the way I've heard from other colleagues, is that the kind of publisher parish demands are seen as being in conflict with community engaged scholarship. And you talked about how do you explain this to, we were in a comfortable, supportive institution, how do we explain that to our external reviewers or to NSF or whatever? And I wonder, as we work toward our next Carnegie application, if you thought about whether some kind of statements or something from the university about community engaged scholarship would be, if you thought that would be helpful in your work, whether it's communicating to, external reviewers for tenure or promotion, or funders, or even our community partners, if any of you have thought about that as an institutional support.
I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I think that would be really helpful. But I feel like I feel like my department's like, been helpful in helping me trying to find reviewers that would understand. And also like, the leadership and the research teams that I'm involved in, like, they're I think, they understand, the need to communicate to like NSF, the, the time commitment involved and how like a grant funding cycle doesn't necessarily match with the amount of time it takes to build like relationships from the ground up. And so, but yeah, I think just like more communication about that in general would be really, really helpful. And I guess like an official statement, I think would be great to include in my tenure and promotion package.
I'm fortunate that in Chicana and Chicana Studies, it does value community engagement, and it's even written into the mission statement. Although perhaps maybe external reviewers that aren't from the university here see it in the same way, but as long as you have, I think, a chair or committee members that understand your work and value it, and then are able to, transfer that sense of importance of the kind of work that you're doing to the evaluators, is something that you don't have to worry about because they're kind of covering your back, and especially in a department like ours, a program like ours that is multidisciplinary, where you have different people doing different things. It's important to have those committee members that understand the value of it and can be able to articulate that to others who may not come from institutions or programs or departments like mine that do value it.
And Rebecca, perhaps since you just gave us an example of one that you had to repeatedly navigate, like leadership changes leading to re-explaining the importance and structure, are there institutional changes you could imagine that would have made it a little more solid, or sort of fewer repeated, like at UNM, fewer repeated negotiations around the project?
Let's see, I mean, I think there are things. One of our things that became difficult was a lot of our external funding came as in the form of gifts. So they came through the foundation from private donors who gave gifts. So I feel like institutionally, the office that is handling, that's the foundation. It's completely separate from, our OVPR's office. And so because there was almost no communication there, the college was accepting gifts at the same time the college was not supporting the project any longer, right? And so thinking about that kind of institutional communication, I think, would be really important. And also thinking about some gifts were coming with they were requesting a proposal. So the donor was saying, we would like to see a proposal, we would like to see a timeline, we would like to see deliverables. So it felt very much like a foundation proposal or some external funders. It was the same process, but again, on the CV, like to say you received a gift, it kind of didn't have, people didn't understand that was a similar, like it was like managing a grant, right? We were still.
It was a peer reviewed process.
Yes. And so I think some sorts of institutional things like that could become part of the recognition system, that this is, your funding is gonna be oftentimes creatively done, right? You're gonna bundle together all types of small bits of funding to make these things happen because we care so much about it. It's like, okay, however we have to get it, but the institution might not see some of that as kind of external funding even. So I think thinking about that would be an institutional support that could have helped. And then I think then the college might have seen, oh, this is an externally funded project. It's, I think that might have contributed to how it was referred to, versus the gift awards were, it would just change, I think, the way it was considered as scholarship or not scholarship. Some of that language, I think, could have been clarified through the institution.
I think, I appreciate all the presentations, it's been very informative. I think, from an institutional kind of level, I'm trying to think about, how to build a better mechanism for mentoring. And, all three of you have gone through the process, and I wonder about, what kind of mentorship you received in terms of going down the community engagement road. And if you did, like, what did that look like? And if you didn't, how could we potentially do a better job here at UNM in terms of, fostering a better ecosystem for community engagement?
I started my career as a public school teacher, so that's where I got my mentoring, what I feel like was my professional mentoring, because your work always is, or at least for the school where I worked, it was always about serving the community and the students, and so I just carried that over, and at times have been surprised that that's just not the way it is, So my naivety around that has just been, it's persisted, and I think has actually been advantageous for me personally. But in the institution, I would say there wasn't a lot of formal mentoring. It's just watching and seeing who you want to be like and trying to do the kinds of things that they're doing. Chosen mentors, I think.
I think for me, like, as I mentioned in my presentation, I think the mentoring or the training that stuck with me the most was the ones that were a part of the actual curriculum. And I took pieces here and there from different mentors, but yeah, what stuck with me most was, like semesters long thinking that it took to, understand why we should do research this way.
For me, I came in as a visiting writer, and then I was a visiting lecturer and then a visiting scholar. So I think because I was visiting, I was I've been visiting for over 22 years now, so, but I think because I came in as a visiting instructor that I was underneath the radar, and so faculty that were preoccupied with their own careers weren't really watching to see what I was doing and when it fit their program. And so I had already been teaching creative writing workshops for over 15 years when I came in as a visiting writer. I had a lot of experience working with communities, with individuals, a lot of storytelling and narrative. So I applied that to my architectural background in the creative writing program. And then I started doing my first oral history documentation project, was I'm still working on all these years later, called Following the Manito Trail. I had no experience in doing something like that, but I just felt like it was an important project to do. And what I was able to do more so was to be receptive to instructors, professors in other programs and departments, not that there were many, but some of the ones that were around that found out about what I was doing, that sought me out and said, hey, I'm really interested in your project, and have you thought about this, have you thought about that? Or, they told me about resources and books and literature and things like that. So that was very helpful to me at the beginning. But it was just really going out there in the dark and just doing it on my own, And so I think that in academia, you're gonna find that a lot of times you are out there on your own. And it helps to know that you have the support or even the admiration of people that are around you. But really, it's just you gotta love what you're gonna be doing, because you're gonna be at it on your own, and we've all been through that, right?
And in doing your work, have any of you been in a situation that as, scholarship or research of all forms, it takes a long time, and that during the process you were working or collaborating with a community or agency or group whose interests really significantly changed, that, in ways that might not have been aligned with what you were coming in with or what you felt needed to happen for your, for you at least furthering a project or your career?
for me, for one of the projects that I'm working on, working with like my home community or like in nearby communities, I started off that project with like with different contacts that I have now. And so it, like the research interest hasn't really changed, but like, those were, I thought, we started off with like the initial contacts who got us in touch with like, some of the main leadership in the communities that we needed to be taking direction from a little more. And so that was something like, I understood from the beginning where, the initial contacts were like, this is something they might be interested in or that we see as a need. But we'll introduce you to, the leadership and then from there, I'd have to understand, okay, what are their needs or interests and it may or may not, align with, what we initially thought I had to do. So, and I'm right in the middle of that process. So, I think, right now the interests still somewhat aligned, but there's like, maybe more detail, that I might have to like adjust to. Or we're understanding like the needs and issues of the leadership and like, maybe as we start building relationships with like additional community members, have to understand that those needs and interests might also change and, have to adjust to it as well. So, yeah, I think, I'm in the middle of that process, so.
For us, something that did impact our work is that the school started to receive pressure from the district related to student test scores of the children at the school. And so they really wanted us to make a case that because we were there, we could improve test scores of the children in reading and math school-wide. So it was we had to work through that expectation quite a bit because we weren't serving, first off, every classroom in the school. And the way the test scores operate, the cycle of them means that, we couldn't really track the children that had access over time because there wasn't a really good data system to show the type of, relationship in the data that they wanted us to make a case for. So we had to talk through that a lot back and forth with the school, and really help them see that our purpose maybe was to, over time, maybe have a positive impact on student achievement, but that wasn't our initial purpose and goal. And so we had to think about the outcomes we could speak to, but those aren't always the ones that a school is getting pressure to improve, right? So we could say this many children had access to the arts. They created these dynamic presentations. We could show that type of work, but we couldn't make the claim that we impacted student achievement. One year literacy went up and everyone said, oh, it's because you were here. And I said, if we want to be honest, we can't make that claim. That is not, that's not a good use of analysis of the data, but but there was a real desire to make that claim, or to show that kind of impact, and it was difficult to do that.
Thank you for sharing. I was just wondering, what was the response when you explained that you couldn't necessarily satisfy the demand in terms of what the district was asking for, and therefore what the folks at the school were hoping that you could give them to satisfy the district?
I mean, I think that there were a lot of tensions there, because the school, the principal and leaders of the school did receive a lot of pressure from the district to, it's really student achievement focused. That's everywhere, right? And so I think they wanted to justify our presence and the amount of time we were spending on arts initiatives with the kids at their school, and they felt nervous that maybe they weren't using that time with children in a wise way to the end of student achievement scores. And so But on the other hand, they noticed a lot of other things in their school that they did appreciate. They noticed that the students like less discipline referrals. In the classes where we did have the student teachers doing arts integration, there was higher attendance rates. There were other reportable things they noticed for the climate of the school. So I think they felt torn between these kind of, these different needs. And we just did our best to keep it going. When the press came to our big events, when it was a school-wide celebration, then it kind of got, generated a life of its own again, and it got to exist as it was. But I think it was something we were constantly managing.
Michael?
I'm just standing as a back. But the question of mentoring that Renia asked, I thought was really, no, it was Tim. What kind of mentoring did you receive? And I think I recall from Lonnie's presentation, you said when you first got involved in this work, it was at the suggestion or the leadership of a faculty member, right? One of your instructors? How did you? When you first got connected with the Navajo Water Project as a master's student.
Yeah, I think as a master's student, I think it was something that I had in mind when trying to come up with a project. I wanted to do something that was, just reciprocal to the Navajo Nation. And so when I couldn't think of a project idea on my own, then I was sort of like, suggested I talked to someone from the tribe, and that's where I happened to meet up with the Jason John, or the hydrologist for the Navajo Nation, at the meeting, and then I asked, and we came up with the project idea together, and that's how the relationship sort of developed.
So I was thinking about the kind of mentoring or influence in the other way, even horizontally or vertically. Levi, you've been teaching for a lot of years here, and even some of your presentations suggested an inspiration to another generation to continue to be involved with that community. And so I'm kind of thinking about our role as faculty when we're that sole person commitment and passion that could, building those relationships over time, that could just fall away when we, relocate or get tired or whatever. I wonder if you could talk about how we can, or you have, kind of spread the passion for your projects to continue the relationship with the communities.
Yeah, for me, I'm working on an oral history documentation project of the East Mountain villages. And so as part of my students' midterm projects in my New Mexico Villages and Cultural Landscapes class, we actually did interviews of the East Mountain communities a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that's, I don't know why, but it surprises me that my students themselves are continuing to go back and talk to people and take photos and just continue to be engaged in that oral history documentation project, even though their papers have already been written and submitted, but they're continuing with the work because they're just so in love with the whole process and of meeting the people and establishing these relationships. So it's good to see that even when I'm out of the picture, they're still continuing to do that kind of work, and that is inspiring.
Well, I have maybe it's a follow-up question, and it's, that I have worked on many group projects as a faculty member in community and regional planning. And each one, for the students, they get so much out of it. Each one goes a little differently over the semester on whether the project is really finalized by the end of the semester. And usually there's something that I can spend some time on and do whatever needs to happen before sharing it, or before sharing the final that the community will have, but I wonder about if that is just part of the process, or are there ways to think about this, one thing that I always hope that we can do at a university is bring skills to bear on these to projects that, like Lonnie you said very eloquently around, having the capacity to do all the measurements but not analyze the data. But we also know that any given class of students or any of that come in with different skills and different knowledge as a sort of baseline knowledge, and then the semesters are still short. And I don't know if there are things that, are there questions, is it timing or that, to think about the work that our students are contributing and ensuring that it is, sometimes in planning, I'll say, because there are these analyses, we worry about the quality of the analysis and worry that we're sharing something that is then going to be used but not where it needs to be. And this, thinking about Rebecca saying, this question on saying, oh look, literacy increased. And sometimes our students would be in a position that they'd be like, oh, look at the impact. And we'd say, hey, we wouldn't be able to look at it that way. Just, the students being very early in this, and how does that influence what we're contributing through the work our students do. Sorry, that was very long and convoluted. I think so many different things about it, I was having a hard time formulating the question.
With the East Mountain project, the aim is to actually produce materials for an exhibit at the Gutierrez Hubble House in the fall. So the students are aware and they do understand that their material is going to be also looked at by another entity and through a different lens and other criteria. I think that also helps kind of in the way in which that their work also then begins to evolve in a different way than that it's just for a classroom presentation. And they keep bringing that up to themselves. Oh yeah, these materials are going to be used for the exhibit, so I got to do this or I got to do that.
Yeah, and in the classroom, I sort of because of the time involved it takes to, develop relationships and collect the data and analyze the data and, present it and then, teach all of that at the same time. I usually have students, work in hypothetical situations, and, sort of have it like a condensed, teach them, have them do a project in a condensed way, but try to emphasize, when you're actually, applying these concepts and these methodologies, you'll have to, it does take time to build the relationships. And I kind of encourage students, if they want to do their professional project or thesis, or if they want to apply it, they could use it as part of their professional project or thesis, something that takes a lot more time and where they have a little more energy to do the work and to build off relationships that they already have or that they're currently building. So I kind of, that's another situation I have to navigate when, teaching teaching students to do the type of research that, I do in a semester long setting. Yeah.
For us, we would think of it in terms of an academic year's kind of goals and projects, but knowing that based on when our student teachers would start their program, sometimes they would only get to experience half of it. Sometimes they get to experience the full, and then their third semester, they're starting a new one that someone else is going to pick up. So we kind of would model it out in this, here's what we think could happen, but we worked a lot with the people who we knew might be consistent in the project for an annual school year on their cycle, because that's what our partners in the schools asked of us, is they wanted it to be kind of August to May. And so we had to fit, even though our UNM students had different kind of time periods in that school, we planned around their kind of curricular requests and needs. That was useful for us.
follow up with that, because I think one of the things when I started doing this kind of work, I realized that, you know, doing a semester or even a year-long project sometimes left a lot to be desired in terms of the outcome. So we decided to do a 3-year commitment on one project, and some of the challenges we had was that, you know, students were graduating, and then, you know, how do you continue that kind of momentum? And so I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience of like a multi-year engagement, and how do you build in consistency with the community and the work that you're doing in terms of, you know, your the institution.
Yeah, I think for me, the graduate students that I mentor and that I bring along to do sort of like mini projects, like, you know, either with the Chusca Mountains or with the Eastern Navajo communities I'm working on, you know, like we kind of have to figure out ways for them to do mini projects that can, you know, fit like their professional project or their thesis requirements within like the larger long-term project or study that I'm doing. And you know, for me, you know, I just have to be the consistent person when it comes to doing those projects. And like, yeah, I can't like I can't really send the student out to be the one to represent me that much. You know, I think people look to me to be the consistent person and to be the one that's, you know, representing the work that's being done.
For me, they tend to be short-term projects, you know, semester-long projects, but in the process, it's really a learning curve, and, you know, what worked well, what didn't work so well, what would we do different next time. And so it kind of helps to shape a template for how I can use a similar assignment in another class, in another semester, another project. But it does help to have that experience. But my projects tend to be short-term, not a year long. That would be nice too. But my students, you know, after the semester is over, they move on to another class or they graduate. So I have to learn how to, you know, how to use the short-term process as a way to be able to help me shape and model what I'm going to be doing with the next class, for example.
I wanted to ask whether you have peers within your department and even at other institutions. Just wondering what your peer support network looks like in terms of, you know, other folks who do community engaged projects, and kind of how you form those networks of support, you know, spaces for exchange and others and so on.
For this project, you know, we all kind of came together as a group, and even when the project ended, we continue to support each other in different ways, because we all still maintain presence at the 2 schools we worked with. But I think even larger, you know, I'm really curious about what people are doing in my college with the community and with that work. So it does seem to be like I just gravitate toward those people so I can learn from them and gain insight into how their work is going. When I do talk to my colleagues at other institutions, sometimes I feel like it does seem a little bit different here. Related to the amount of people I know who are doing something, whether they would classify it or not as community engaged scholarship, it does feel like there are a number of people in my college who are doing that type of work, and so it feels well supported in that way, in terms of having colleagues who consistently talk about some part of their professional life and time being dedicated to that.
Yeah, for me, our doing community engaged work is like, you know, fundamental to our department. So yeah, it's just kind of, I think, built into how our department functions. and then also me being like a former student here, me coming from like an earth sciences background, I felt like, when I came back as a faculty, they already had, a network of people who were there for me to continue, who were there to continue to mentor me, as a faculty member now, and who are also, my peers now. So that's been, I think, very helpful for me. And then there's also at a national level, there's a network of other young Native scholars, who are in water sciences, and that I work with or engage with, and we can communicate with each other and talk about talk about everything that we go through.
One of the new things that's happening in my department is that with all the different forms of community engagement that I am doing and that my colleagues are doing, is that we have a project now called Arte por Vida. And the Arte por Vida initiative is that we're actually bringing the kind of work that we're individually doing out in the community, we're bringing it to our program, and we're having workshops and presentations, culinary arts, music, wood carving, weaving, all kinds of really cool things like that are happening in our department over at La Casita. And so it's really neat to see how we've been able to influence the work that we're doing has influenced what we're also doing here at the university. It's really neat to see and how it's growing and how the students are taking to that, and other faculty also. Everybody's really involved. It's very organic, but it just started, and it's only getting stronger and more exciting all the time. So it's interesting to see that, how, again, to be redundant, but to see the kind of work that we're doing out in the community and how that's transferring itself to actually happening here in our home department.
I also think it's interesting when a community contact can introduce you to someone from UNM who you might work with. And that's actually how I met Tim. We were both working with the National Hispanic Cultural Center on a different project. We met through that project, and that was a long time ago. And so we've consistently kept in touch on different types of things, and even though they haven't overlapped as significantly, there's always the chatter about what might we think about, or how are we each engaging differently. But I think that knowing that there's people across campus, however you meet them, can also be really nourishing.
I know we're sitting close to the time, but thank you all for your presentations. I'm actually looking at this from a staff perspective. I work in advisement in the College of Arts and Sciences, and kind of just starting to dip my toes into the world of community engagement. But looking at from the perspective of, as advisors, we're helping to guide students in selection of different courses, and some colleges, you have it built in where they need to be out in the community or in schools. But I'm guessing, is there something that could be done more with engaging the advisement community in terms of informing us who are the different partners that are doing community engagement work? And maybe that's an institutional way that we can help guide students to encourage them to sign up for certain courses, because they'll get that really high impact experience. I'm wondering if any of you would be interested in coming and talking to advisors, or if that information is being collected somewhere, maybe on this website that I don't know about, where you can identify people who are offering courses where there's that element in it, and then you can get to know other faculty who are doing things, but also as a resource for students who can maybe help push the demand for this continued type of work in terms of filling in classes and getting that experience.
Yeah, I think, it would be great to get a list going, and then hopefully, these classes are that teach about community engagement, it can be a part of curriculum throughout UNM eventually. But I think getting a list going for you to advise And then I think for me, I've been advising undergrads who are part of like, undergraduate research internships or programs like that. I think that's besides the classes that I teach, how I can directly mentor undergraduate students like that who are interested in community engagement.
Yeah, I think CE could definitely be a wonderful resource for community engaged scholarship and faculty that are doing that kind of work, even for students who are considering a community engaged thesis or dissertation that maybe they don't have someone in their department that they're familiar with that does that kind of work, and they could reach out to CE for a list of faculty and programs, classes, that are offering that kind of work. It'd be great to have your contact information also as well. We could send you our course descriptions, etc. For, when people are registering for the next semester, that would be a good time to be able to do
And
that.
this is the time when it's gonna start happening all next week is registration. And I know Erica helps advise undergraduates for Chicano studies when she's leaving.
Rebecca?
So, well, Erica does it for the undergraduates.
Oh, okay.
Students, and she's leaving soon, so I want there to be some more overlap of information, so we
That'd
can
be
share
great.
that.
Just one more, just to kind of circle back, because I think one of the things that we really need is to be able to collect that data and deposit in the community engagement website. So we're sort of behind the curve in terms of having a resource like that. But the good thing being behind the curve is that there's institutions across the country that have done it way better than we have. And so we're going to try to model those and be able to have a repository where, advising people to in the future. So give us a little time. But yeah.
With you then. And this will be the last comment or question as we wrap up.
I think, wrapping up, I'm curious, now that you have, and I don't know if you've shared space together before, so forgive me if you have already shared space like this, but just wondering if you're going to continue to be in contact with each other and what that might mean for your individual and possibly even collective work.
Well, I'm the only one that's not in contact with her, except for you already and Tim, but maybe when I get tenure.
If there was a possibility to create institutionally a course that was embedded in the registration that was 1 year long, would you be interested? Do you see that as a possibility?
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, and I'd have to think about it more, but I'd be open to that, yeah.
One example I saw was a class I could not get into because it was the second semester of a 2-semester pairing. So it wasn't a 1-year course. It wasn't here, it was in grad school, but it was like, but I really want that class, I need it, I tried to, it was taught by Lonnie Bernier, and I really wanted to. So I was trying to talk her into it, but it somehow, the first semester wasn't as filtered and the second semester was filtered by.
And I hope we can continue to have conversations on thinking about both community engaged teaching and creating the institutional support for really the robust research that comes out of some courses, like Levi's courses as well. So really thinking about both of these, but if you will all join me in thanking the panelists, Levi, Rachel, and Lonnie for their work and for talking with us today.
Thank you.